Recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Love Rising podcast. Today is especially special for me because we have an absolutely amazing guest. She is somebody that I've been aspiring to be like since the day I was born because she's my big sister. She is like the most amazing, most inspiring woman I know. And so, of course, we're talking about we're talking about pregnancy. We're talking about all the good things about motherhood this month. And so nobody better than my sister to come on, who is the mother of my two beautiful, beautiful nieces, Lenny and Minnie. And so she has really just been so inspiring about this whole birthing journey. She'll share her story a little bit about kind of how she got to where she is, which is a really amazing story. But it's been beautiful to watch her blossom into a mother and to be a mother and one of the best moms I've ever seen. And I know she's probably blushing right now, but she truly is. And so I feel honored because I know that when it's time for us to go down that journey and that route, I have her by my side with so much knowledge, and she's doing amazing things way opposite side of the states from me down in Texas. Okay, before I keep going, I will just dive into her bio because we have a lot of great information. So we are going to talk about prenatal yoga and active birthing, which I'm really excited to hear about because active birthing, she's told me her story, but I don't entirely know, and I hope you guys will learn a lot from this as well. But Melissa Terry is originally from Minnesota and currently lives in South Texas on the U.S.-Mexican border in McAllen. She is a yoga teacher certified through Yoga Alliance with 200 hours in Vinyasa and 40 hours in Ashtanga. She most recently completed a prenatal yoga training in 2017. Melissa has been practicing yoga for about 10 years and has been teaching since 2014. She manages Rio Prenatal Yoga in McAllen, Texas, and is the mother of two very young daughters, both of whom she birthed very actively. So, welcome, Melissa.
Hello, thank you for having me, and thank you for that lovely intro. You can tell we're sisters because we're
I know. If you're watching the video,
Can
you'll
you
be
guys
like, yep.
tell by like anyone who's watching the video? Can you tell they're sisters?
We look a lot alike.
Yeah.
I used her real idea for my fake idea. We'll just say that.
Yes, I'm finally over it though.
That's another story for another time. So Mel, please tell us about your story, your journey within motherhood, birthing, everything.
Sure. Well, so I started yoga when I should also say I'm not just, for the purposes of my bio, I'm a yoga teacher, but my full-time job is actually, I'm a professor here in South Texas. So I have been in school for like decades, and while I was doing my master's program, I started feeling like I needed some anxiety relief, stress relief, and people had kept telling me about yoga, and so I decided to check it out, and I found that it was just really great, not only for giving me clarity, because I was just feeling really overwhelmed with school, but also I found the physical practice to be really exciting. So I started doing yoga about 10 years ago in my master's program, and then I got really into it when I was doing my PhD program, and then I got really into it when I started birthing babies. But that's, a whole different story. But basically that's after I had my first daughter, and I'll talk more about my birthing experiences. But I did my prenatal yoga training after I had my first daughter, because everyone had told me, well, if you're a yoga teacher, you have to do a prenatal yoga training while you're pregnant. It's such a special time, so amazing, because you get to kind of experience the training as you're actually producing a child. And so I did it with my second baby, Lenny, and I went to Minneapolis. There's an amazing, if any of your listeners are thinking about doing a prenatal yoga training, there's one of the best ones in the country, I'd say, is in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which happened to be so convenient for me. So one summer when I was home visiting family in Minnesota, I did this training just actually a couple summers ago. I'll be doing another training there this coming summer, but it's a place called Bluma, and it's amazing. So if any of your listeners are in the Minneapolis area, I highly recommend it for all things prenatal, because it's a yoga space. You can go there and do yoga bar. They have kids yoga, baby yoga, all that good stuff. Mommy and me yoga. But so I did it there, and I was just so happy with that experience. And then once I had my second child, I really decided that I wanted to start teaching prenatal yoga and start moving away from like vinyasa, which prenatal yoga is still vinyasa, so we'll talk about that later. But I really wanted to focus on childbirth education and educating mamas, telling them how they could use movement in their birthing process because it's become so static. But that's sort of part of we'll get to all that later. But basically that's where I came to be actually starting to use yoga in terms of childbirth, and then began starting a small little business here in South Texas because there's really not much for prenatal yoga at all. And so I saw that need, and there's a very large birthing community down here, and it's just such a great way to prepare for birth. And so I started Rio Prenatal Yoga not very long ago in 2017, and it's just starting to kind of grow. I'm really excited about it. We are going to be featured soon in a local newspaper is doing like a health and medicine book that they put out. So that's coming out in the end of November. I just got a website. I'm doing placenta encapsulation now. So there's a lot of little things that I'm really excited about. And for future reference, I'm trying to, one of my colleagues and I, Carla, who you will be talking to in a couple weeks, she's an occupational therapist down here, and she works on perinatal, pre and postnatal occupational therapy. And her and I are thinking of trying to start this business called the Birth Circle, in which we want to be all things like supportive for women who are birthing, and men, dads too. So we want to have education, obviously yoga, occupational therapy, nursing aides, lactation consultants, support circles, free library, massage therapy, baby yoga, all sorts of things, natural products, natural teas, things that can help mama before and after giving birth. And so that's kind of where I got to where I am right now. I'm still kind of starting out on this journey. And I'm still a full-time professor and a full-time stay-at-home mom with 2 babies. So I'm slowly working on building this business and this kind of career that I want for myself, but also, has to happen at midnight when I finally have time, and it's kind of crazy. But that's where I am right now. And that was probably really long-winded.
It's great. It's perfect. You can just tell you're so passionate about it. And so it's, Clara and I talk about that all the time, and how you just have to follow like what puts you in your flow and what really pulls you. And so it's exciting that you found that in the birthing process.
Yeah. I love that idea of putting more weight in the back of your pickup truck. And the story around that is like, this guy buys a new pickup truck. I probably told it on the podcast before, but I'll tell it again. This guy buys a new pickup truck. He's super excited about it. He has to go and collect some wood to heat his house. So he goes up into the mountains. It's snowing. And what do you know? He gets stuck, right? And he tries everything to get unstuck. He moves the snow. He adds, gravel. He does everything he can think of to get this pickup truck unstuck, and he can't get it unstuck. And a voice tells him, or he gets a feeling, go do what you were going to do. Go chop the wood, go collect the wood. So he collects the wood, loads it up in the pickup truck, and he gets out because he put weight in the back of the truck. And so the weight, the more pressure, the more things we have almost that require our attention end up giving us more traction in our life. So not that I'm pro, overextending ourselves or anything, but I think sometimes the more we have in the back, you know, the more responsibility we take on, the better traction we can have sometimes.
Absolutely. I think, and that's inspiring, because sometimes I'm like, oh, I can't handle all this, but then, you know, then when I go and I teach prenatal yoga, I'm just like, I want this to be what I do all the time, you know? So that every time that I do it, I'm like, this is why I'm doing it. And this is, I'm moving towards having this be something that I get to do even more often. So we'll see.
So I would love for us to dive into what active birthing is and what it looks like. If you could explain that kind of to our listeners, that would be great.
Sure. So active birthing, I actually borrowed from Janet Velasquez, who wrote a book in the 80s. So of course it's slightly dated, but all of my favorite
excuse me, we were all made in the 80s, so could you be careful with how you say that? No, I'm kidding.
Well, I mean, in terms of research, you know, and academia and that world, that would be dated work. And of course she has updated and added, she's still alive and she's still working. She has the Active Birth Center, but it came out in 83. And so, but I find that most of my favorite birth books are like from the 80s and 70s, stuff like that anyway. But basically it's called Active Birthing, or Active Birth, I believe, new approaches to giving birth naturally. And so basically what she's saying in this book, and what I've come to really love and use in my teaching yoga, is that, you know, birth has become really static. It's become something that, well, actually, I wanted to ask the two of you, when you think of birth, what are the images that come to mind?
I mean, for me, because I'm around people more like you, and active people, like for me, I see a lot of pregnant women doing either CrossFit, lifting, headstands, and yoga class. So like that's the environment that I'm around, I guess. So that's very different than majority of people, I feel like, though.
My question is, though, birthing, not pregnant women.
Oh.
Like, when you think of someone birthing.
Yeah.
I think of like a woman just like screaming her face off and like sweating.
Yeah. Like a
and like
hospital environment.
Medical, you know, like doctors around. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you're both referencing popular culture references, right? These things that are in our collective subconscious, or maybe not so subconscious, about the way that we view birth and the way that we see birthing in movies, TV shows. The woman's like, oh my God, and she's lying on her back and she's contracting and getting through these contractions and screaming. And the doctor is nicely, conveniently sitting on a chair, you know, at the edge of her bed. And this is what we see, right? And so, and we associate this with, oh my God, pain, the worst pain you've ever felt. I'm not going to say it's not, okay? I'm not saying that. But I think that it's not so black and white. And the way that birth has been painted in contemporary culture is that associated with pain. I mean, sometimes you might think of, you know, in popular culture, we do see doctors saying, oh, why don't you take a walk down the hallway, right? So there's like some sort of action involved, but nothing like what I would say active birth allows. So the thing about active birth, and the thing about the way that I teach my yoga classes, is that I always tell my students, baby can't move if you're not moving, right? So if you're lying back on the bed, baby can't move anywhere. The thing about active birth is that we really use gravity. And mothers are encouraged to use instinctive positions, upright birthing positions, however they feel most comfortable. Most women, if you ask them while they're birthing, if they're comfortable lying on their back, they're going to say, no, I'm not. You feel like you have to move because you're not comfortable. And how do you become comfortable? Well, you move and you try to find a different position that's more comfortable. That's just like the way that we live our lives, right? Oh, I'm uncomfortable. Let me move and see if I can get comfortable. When you're lying on your back and you're told you're supposed to stay there, you can't be comfortable, especially because if you're lying on your back, baby is actually pressing down on your spine, making back labor even more painful for you. So that's one thing about active birth, is that we encourage mothers to be using their kind of intuitive and instinctive upright birthing positions, however they feel most comfortable. If that's lying on your back, great. That's another thing I want to emphasize is that I always say in my classes, like, dude, well, lady dude, whatever. If you feel really comfortable lying on your back, do it. If you feel super comfortable, having a hospital birth with all types of interventions, do it. I'm not saying that people should have a natural birth with midwives in water, but if you want to, you should. What's most important for birthing women is that they're comfortable, because your body cannot open up, your cervix cannot dilate if you're not comfortable with your plan and with how things are going. And now I was going to go off on another tangent, but I will move to comfort later. We'll talk about that later, because right now you were asking about active birth specifically. So it is totally fine. It is the instinction, like the empowering the woman to actually instinctively use the positions that feel most comfortable for her, no matter, that could mean a variety of things. I also think active birth can be used in terms of women actively taking a role in the decisions that they're making about birthing while they're birthing, right? And so obviously doctors are really important. Midwives are really important. The people who are here to aid in your birth are really important. They're going to help you, right? That's their job. But they shouldn't be the one to tell you how to birth. You should listen to your body. And so that's another thing that's very important about active birth is like taking an active role in the decisions that you're making about your body, listening to your body, and allowing your body to tell you how to birth, because it knows how. Most pregnancies, most births are not high risk, despite the fact that we have a 30% C-section rate. C-sections used to be specifically for high-risk pregnancies. They're not anymore. I mean, it's not a secret. 30%. I think that there's a recent study that just came out that said that we shouldn't be higher than 15%, which is still super high, right? So it should be at half that. But the reason is that we just don't trust our bodies anymore. We don't trust the process of birthing that our bodies are typically completely prepared for. And that's not to say, I want to make a point here to also say that doesn't mean that every woman's body is perfectly prepared and ready to birth. That's just not the case. And, this is why we have emergency C-sections. They're really, really important. I was a C-section because I had a placenta previa, which meant the placenta was in front of me, would have been delivered first, and I would have died. So that's a really important reason why C-sections are necessary. I think they're very necessary. But we've come to the fact that many doctors are really good surgeons. They're better surgeons than they are, at delivering vaginal births for women. They're really good surgeons. And so they feel very comfortable doing, for them, very routine surgery, which is actually major abdominal surgery for women. And so that's a whole different thing too. I mean, that could be a different podcast where we talk about that type of thing. And I'm not here to kind of talk about that. Really, it just sort of happened. But we do see that if women are not given the trust that they need to use their body freely, to move freely, to use gravity, to trust our bodies and to have confidence in ourselves, we see that leads to interventions. And one thing that happens with interventions, and this is something that has always been stressed in all the training I've done with prenatal yoga, is that if there's one intervention, it usually leads to another intervention. It's not like it's not very common that a woman is like, oh, I'm just gonna, maybe you just want to have Pitocin, which is an artificial hormone that helps to induce, it's supposed to help induce labor. And that oftentimes actually leads to the necessity of other types of interventions, because it puts stress on the baby and the mom in certain ways that slows the baby's heart rate down. Oh, this is happening. Okay, well, now we have to intervene in another way. So I won't go too much into that, but interventions typically lead to more interventions. So the thing with active birth is it puts trust in mom's body and the power that she has to birth naturally, rather than thinking, oh, the first thing we need to do, okay, you're not progressing as quickly as we want you to be progressing. You're not dilating as quickly as we want. Well, rather than saying, okay, well, then let's think about interventions that can help you. Okay, those can be helpful. That's fine. And if a mom feels most comfortable, absolutely. But we want to offer this other option, which is moving, actively moving around, moving your body, because if you move, the birth canal shifts too. Your pelvis shifts. You know, this is maybe not off topic, but moving forward into something I was going to talk about later, but I always tell my moms in yoga classes, there are certain poses you can do in the car on your way, because when you're in the car and you're going over bumps, I'm sitting on a birth ball right now, actually. So actually it's a workout ball, I suppose, but I call it a birth ball because that's primarily what I used it for. But I tell, moms, if you're sitting in the back of the car, the movement of sitting in the back of the car, you're jiggling back and forth, that helps baby to move down, right? It's great. So I tell moms, like, what you should be doing is on all fours in the back seat, and then the movement of the car is going to help move baby down the birth canal on your way to the hospital. You should not be sitting in the front seat, a bucket seat, which tucks your pelvis under, right? Your pelvic bone tucks under and closes off the birth canal and actually closes off the pelvis. And so you can actually, your progression can actually regress on your way to the hospital if you're sitting in a bucketed seat, static. What you should be is in the back seat. And, of course, most of my moms are like, that's crazy. But I'm like, well, but it makes sense. It's evidence-based. It makes sense that your body is actually going to become more relaxed if you're moving in this way. And the most important thing about birthing is relaxation. You can't birth a baby if you're clenched up. So active birthing allows us to be relaxed, to move freely. It also helps us because it allows us to, when we're relaxed, our body can actually create and release more of these really amazing birth hormones, like oxytocin, which actually is like a natural pain reliever, right? Which is 10 times the power of morphine. That's amazing. And so just think about that. And endorphins, these are natural hormones that our body releases when we're birthing, and it releases them slowly over time so that as the pain becomes more intense, our body can cope with it. And it's just this natural mechanism. This is the way that our body has functioned forever. So this is also another thing.
I have a question just about why, and this could be a really long, involved answer, but maybe there's a simpler, succinct answer. Like, why have we been doing it? I'm listening to you talk and I'm like, yeah, this all makes sense. Like, of course. Why are we giving birth on our backs? And why, why?
Let me tell you. That was my next point, because I think that the next thing we want to talk about was like the history. So that's a great question. Why would we do this, right? So there's, and really, perhaps this is not new news, but there's only hospitalization of birth is a new thing. It's a new phenomenon. It used to be that midwives would come to your home and you'd birth at home with midwives. Of course, that's not to say that there weren't all sorts of issues with this, right? There were high mortality of maternal birthing women dying, babies dying, of course, right? But that's because the science was also different at that time. We didn't have the resources that we have now. But the shift to hospital birthing didn't really happen until the turn of the 20th century, which is very contemporary. And even at that time, there was a push towards the hospitals, but still many women are birthing at home with midwives. It's really not until the 1930s or so that we see a real shift to moving from midwives, so women caring for women, to hospitals where we have men caring for women, because especially at the turn of the century, most women weren't actually allowed to be doctors. So men were the doctors and they were the surgeons. And so there was this push towards using anesthesia, which was like this new exciting thing at the time. There's actually, excuse me, there's a show on Netflix called Call the Midwife. And I was super into it for a while. And then I couldn't watch it anymore because it was just like too hard to watch when I was very emotional with my second baby. But it's interesting because it's a historical drama, you know, but it's like these midwives working in these British midwives. I guess I don't know, like maybe it's like in the 1940s or something like that. But they talk about anesthesia and like the first time that anesthesia existed, and women were so excited because for the first time there was the option to have a pain-free birth or something close to that, right? We didn't want to feel birth. And of course, there were all sorts of complications with this as well. But we did see a real interest in moving to the hospital, moving to those spaces. And with those spaces come interventions, right? So like I said, different drugs that were administered, epidurals, anesthesia, all these things were seen as really important and really progressive. And that's not to say that they're not great things. You know, some women just don't want to feel it, and that's completely fine. And I don't blame women for not wanting to feel birth. But we have to realize that the reason why there's a problem with interventions is that they're also usually harder on the baby. They mean certain things for the baby and for the mom in the present and in the aftermath. But that would have to be another podcast as well. But to get to your original question, the reason why we really see, and this seems super funny and weird, but it seems that King Louis XIV was the French king, was the first one to say, oh, I kind of want my wives to birth on their back. He had 22 children and with his wives and his mistresses. And he decided that he wanted to be a major creeper and wanted them to birth on their backs so he could watch from the doctor's point of view. And so that's sort of where we first see women birthing on their backs, because prior to this, women would birth in a squatting position. This is why we do so many squats in my yoga classes, because this is actually the best position to birth in. We'll talk about that later. But it is believed that he wanted women to birth in this way, and it sort of stuck. And then, of course, it's convenient. It's stuck because it's very convenient for doctors. Do you want to have a woman, one of your clients, walking around, squatting, right? Then the doctor has to walk around and follow her. It's really convenient for a doctor to say, hey, lay back here. I'm going to sit here with my nice fancy chair, and I'm going to wait because I can access the birth canal easiest here. So that's why we have that. It's honestly for convenience of the doctor. Many contemporary doctors have moved away from that, which has been really great, and have said to the woman, you know, they understand that there are quicker labors and easier labors if a woman's able to move around and do a squat, half squat, you know, any type of other position, anything rather than birthing on your back. It's going to be a lot better for mom. But that's kind of where we have that history coming from. It's a convenience thing.
So crazy.
I think that's so fascinating. So there's so many questions that I have in there, but I guess one that kind of keeps coming up is, like, you talked about trusting yourself, and like, you know, that's probably something that you need to practice during your pregnancy, I would assume. So how can you practice that? Is that something that yoga offers? Are there different ways that you can practice that? You know, so that you're not, because I feel like if you're not practicing it come day of birth, like, it's not going to kick in instinctively.
Totally. Yes, practicing. This is something that we do practice in yoga, and part of it is forming a community of mamas, where you learn from other mamas' experiences, and it's power in numbers, right? And seeing that other women have done it before you, and you can do it, and seeing, you know, having women talk to one another about their experiences and trusting their body has been really powerful, and I think that really helps. To kind of get out of that mindset that, like, no, I can't do this. I'm going to let my doctor tell me how to do this. So rather than thinking about birth as something that happens to us, it's something that we do, right? It's something that we're actively doing. So that needs to be part of it. In terms of yoga and what we practice, we absolutely talk about birth the whole time during the yoga classes. So just getting to know the vocabulary. I think education is a huge part of it too. So obviously I always stress going to childbirth education classes. I have a couple good friends in the Valley who teach really amazing classes. But the other thing that I want to stress is that my classes they're not like a regular prenatal yoga class where, I was going to so I started teaching prenatal yoga before I had trained in prenatal yoga, when I was pregnant with my first baby, when I lived in Illinois, because the owner of the studio I taught at was like, oh, you're pregnant, cool. Do you want to teach this prenatal yoga class? And I was like, all right, sounds good. I'll look it up. I was like, let me Google that. And so I did. And, obviously I had already had a 200-hour training in yoga. So it was easy for me to look it up and be like, oh, I know I'm not supposed to do twists or inversions later in yoga or this and that, like certain things you don't do, a lot of core work. And so I would teach these classes that were just kind of like a gentle restorative variation of yoga where we didn't do twists and we didn't do inversions, and moms loved it and it was great and it was super fun for me when I was pregnant. And then I went to do my training where I found, oh my gosh, prenatal yoga can be so much more than that. And something that the lady who owns and did my training, the lady who owns Blooma, one of the first things she said to us, which I thought was amazing, was she's like, hey, unfortunately, childbirth education classes are not as high as they used to be. People aren't going to them as much as they used to. But guess what is really popular right now? Yoga. So basically she said, and she's a doula as well and a childbirth educator. So she's like, well, I see people not coming to these classes. People are totally coming to yoga classes. I'm going to make my yoga classes into childbirth education classes. And so basically that's what we do. It's completely different. So if you come to my yoga class, we're going to talk about birth the entire time, and you're going to get probably annoyed of it. And the whole time, the class is actually supposed to mimic a natural labor cycle. So there are 3 stages of labor. And so we kind of set out the class to actually mimic the 3 stages of labor. So you start with early labor, then you go into active, and then we go through what we call the transition in labor, which is where you've completely dilated. And this is the most intense part of labor. And then, we birth, just kidding. But in my class, we always laugh because I'm like, you made it, you did it. And my students just laugh. And I'm like, I know, it's a bad joke because it's totally not like birthing. But, we get to this climax where we do goddess pose and we hold it for a very long time, which is, and we do it many, many times. And it's this pose where everything is engaged. The pelvic floor has to be engaged. You've got pressure down there because of baby, and we really work together and we talk about the mind-body connection. We talk about community and the women around us who are giving us strength. And we talk about pain. What does it mean, right? And how can we change what it means? Because if we can change what it means in the mind, we can change how we experience it. And we can talk more about that actually in a bit too. But that's what I find what I hope helps women the most to kind of get over that hurdle of not trusting their body to do what it naturally will do really, really well if they allow it to.
So there's a couple things that I would love to hear from you. And first of all, you talk about this active birthing, but when most people go into the hospital, are they going to be allowed to do this? Is this something that they can actually have a voice in at the hospital? Let's start there.
That's a great question. Yes, unfortunately, you're very right about that. It depends on the doctor. Doctors are getting better and better about it. And I know that usually you have to have a fetal monitoring system on you. If you're in a hospital, it's just a requirement. And I actually never gave birth in the hospital. I had 2 births at a birth center with midwives. where they monitored me with a little machine that they would just like put on my belly every once in a while, because I was in a tub too. But I did go to hospitals before I birthed to check them out because I was deciding where I wanted to birth. And I know that a lot of hospitals are getting really good at having a mobile machine that they can like stick to you, like they can put it on like a belt or something, so you can still move around. And that's really, really great. And that's really innovative and exciting for women who want to birth more actively. I've also heard from a variety of women that there's a lot more options, like doctors will have birthing balls, which I'm sitting on right now. They'll have like sort of props that you can use to squat, and they'll allow you to do such things. But honestly, it just depends on your doctor. And, you know, the really good ones are realizing, you know, it's the evidence shows that women who are birthing in a squatting or active position, actually, those will be shorter births and easier births. So it is something that I always encourage moms to make, to talk to your doctor about it, right? They need to know if you want to have a more active birth. Many of them will say, great, sounds good, we'll try it. If it doesn't work, you might have to seek out interventions. But most of them will say, hey, I'm willing to try this. This is your birth, it's not theirs. So a good doctor is going to be very supportive of this type of thing. And I think that it's moving more and more towards that, so which is really great.
Amazing. That's so great to hear. That was just something that kind of kept coming up for me. I mean,
totally.
You know, you're in a, like you happen to be in a, I feel like a pretty forward birthing place. Like me, where I am, I guess I haven't, maybe not, I guess I haven't, I'm not planning on having babies like tomorrow, but I've heard there is like a birthing center within Sanford, which is like the big hospital around here. So I'm hoping that more places are seeing things like that at least. I guess my next question would be around prenatal yoga and like understanding the importance of it. And then also, you know, we have a lot of moms probably who haven't been practicing yoga. And so is it safe for them to go and start doing yoga when they're pregnant? Like what is safe for them to do? What's not, you know?
I think that is a great question as well. So your first question was, what do you get from a prenatal yoga class? That's kind of like that kind of thing. So as I have already sort of said, is that we get to talk about birth the whole time. But one of the most important things I find is the community. When I moved here, I didn't have like any community. I moved here a month before I was going to give birth. So I went through all the hospital visits. My pregnancy was in a hospital in Illinois. I moved here and I met a fabulous doula in the area, and she told me about this birth center. And so I was very lucky that I found that space. I'm trying to think now what your question was and why I started with that.
Yeah, we were just talking about like the benefits of yoga, and if you haven't been practicing, like why it's important, and if you haven't been practicing, if it's okay.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know where, so I know you can edit some of this in and out. So like, but I don't know why I started talking about that.
I got you.
So, because I was talking about community and lack thereof. Because I moved here and I didn't have any support, and it was just really hard. I had postpartum depression and I didn't know who to talk to. And so part of me starting this Rio Prenatal Yoga is really wanting to offer a space for women to come together and get to know one another as they go on this journey. So that's something that we really emphasize in class, is that we start with a circle where we all introduce ourselves every single class. We talk about our babies, you know, we talk about we don't call it a due date. We try to call it a guest date, because we all know the percentage of babies that's due on their due date, I think, is like 2%. You know, it's like super low. So getting away from expectations that your baby has to be due on this date, because then you come at it from a negative viewpoint. If you're 2 days late, you're like, oh, I'm late. And then that's not a good way to start, right? Thinking that you're late for something. But anyway, we talk about our due dates, where there are guest dates, where we're birthing, our doctors. People want to talk about gender, names, anything they want to talk about. Like, if they had a great massage this week, just really anything. And then they share resources and, oh, I want a massage too. Where'd you get that? Oh, where do you go to chiropractic? Where do you go to get this and that? Who's your doula? And so we try to start with that. We always start with that. And we give it like 10 minutes, because it's really important. And then, as I said, classes progress through kind of the natural 3 stages of labor. And so we have a climax, and then we dance it out. Afterwards, we just sort of have like a small dance party. And I always say, like, dance is one of the best things you can do when you're in labor. And so I always recommend, hey, get that playlist and make it good. One of my students, who was fabulous, said that she's going to put Salt and Pepper's Push It on hers. And I was like, that's amazing, right? And so there are all these like great things that you find at a class like this that you're just not going to, you're not going to find in a regular birth class or a regular yoga class. So we dance because movement is one of the best things you can do. The other great thing that I think is really helpful is that we do a lot of breath work. Really important. So Lamaze is a thing for a reason, right? It's breath work, essentially. So in yoga, we do what we call pranayama. But basically what we specifically do in our yoga classes is, I would call it like an active breathing, a loud type of breathing, learning to breathe with sound. So there's a variety of reasons why this is really important for women, birthing women, because we know that there is a link between our orifices, right? This is called sphincter law. There's a midwife named Ina May who wrote this amazing book called now I'm like blanking on it, Natural Childbirth, a guide, Ina May's Guide to Natural Childbirth. And she talks about sphincter law, the idea that the sphincters in our body are all connected. So if we release the jaw and the mouth, you're also relaxing the cervix. So that's amazing, right? And that's why actually breathing out the mouth, making shushing noises, shh, all these types of things, this active, loud breathing, it's really, really great for birth. And I always tell my students too, hey, make out with your partner. It's great for relaxing your cervix because it relaxes your mouth, it relaxes your jaw, and it also creates a sense of relaxation for you, right? You're doing this thing it's really intimate and great, and it's preparing your body and allowing things to open where they need to open. So we work a lot on releasing the jaw, different types of breath work that release the jaw. It's really important. It's something in my class. And then also associating like the noise. And Clara, you said you associate like birth with noise, like women screaming, right? And so becoming okay with the fact that you're going to scream, right? And so we're loud breathers in yoga class too, so that we're become okay. And it's like normal for us to be like, we make these really loud breaths. We open the mouth. We do it together as a team because it's something that we're going to be doing during birth. And it's, if you feel like you have to scream, but instead you want to clench your jaw and be like, no, I don't want to sound weird. Well, then you're going to be clenching your cervix too. And so we do this really active really relaxing and releasing of the jaw through this really kind of loud breathing in class, so that the sounds really associated with birth, which are ones of pain, right, instead can be ones that we associate with rejoicing, happiness, right? The idea that, okay, the noise that's being made, the discomfort that is, happening to my body is something that's good. It's not a bad one. This is not bad pain. So it brings me to my next point about rethinking pain. So something else that we really focus on in yoga class is talking through our discomfort. Understanding a contraction is usually about a minute long in active labor. That's not that long. You can count up and down through your contraction. Knowing it's coming to an end is really important. So we do certain poses that are really intense for about a minute. And during those poses, we're building our stamina. We're also talking about rethinking what pain means. Okay, right now, your legs are burning, but you're okay, right? And they're all like, yeah, I'm okay. I got this. I'm strong. That's how labor works too. You're like, okay, this is really uncomfortable, but let me sit with it and let me figure out how to just be in this space. So I don't have to work, from a space of panic and fear. Rather, you work from a space of acceptance. Okay, this is really uncomfortable. This is really painful. Guess what's going to happen though? I'm going to get my baby from this. So rethinking that pain and maybe making mantras.
Yeah, that's so good, because I think I was just thinking about, and I'm not pregnant, or, you know, I want to have kids relatively soon, but I think one thing that scares me the most is pain, of like the thought of the pain of childbirth. I think that's very, obviously there's all the things about having kids that you can't do when you don't have kids. You know, that whole process is scary too, but I think like the birthing process I do carry fear around it. And I think that that's really powerful to hear about this reframing of pain, because I can get behind that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's totally legit. And I was terrified with both of my babies, even after I'd already done it before. And after I had my first baby, I was like, nope, never again. I was like, adoption sounds absolutely lovely. And I still think that it's a fabulous option, but I was like, literally like, never again. And, you know, you forget that kind of thing. And then I sort of, it is a very temporary pain, right? And it's one that, like I said, like I used mantras, and that's something that I talk about in class too, is we do visualizations where we close our eyes and we visualize our birth. We also think about mantras that we might want to use during our birth. Like when I was birthing both my babies, my mantra was this, you know, and there's lists online that you can find. I found a list and I picked out a few I really liked. And so when I was in the most like just deepest active labor, or it's approaching, they call it the ring of fire, when you're actually birthing, crowning, I kept saying to myself, this is a temporary, and I kept saying, this is a necessary discomfort that will bring my baby to me. And I kept saying that to myself, like, hey, nothing's broken. It's not like I broke my leg right now and I'm like, oh no, I broke my leg. That's horrible. This is a horrible pain. It's like, if you're in pain, that means everything is going right for the most part. You know, like usually when we have pain, it's fight or flight, right? And so we want to, oh, no, get out of the situation. Well, here you really want to start thinking about how to sit in that situation, accept it, and actually realize that it's a good thing. This is a good pain. And so repositioning the ideas of pain we associate with pain, and specifically around birthing, can be really powerful for women as they work through this discomfort. And so we try to make that a huge part of class too, like rethinking what it means to be in pain.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. And I agree with Clara. And that's where it probably does take a lot of practice prior, leading up to it, using these affirmations, using these mantras, practicing this breath work, practicing being in a squat. And it doesn't mean that you have to be ass to the grass. Like you can be in, you know, but it's true. And so just like, I love that you really emphasize that everybody's birthing plan is going to look different. But if you can have at least set yourself up in a way that's going to set you up for a very, a pregnancy in the way that you at least would like to. And of course, there's always situations where, you know, you might end up with an emergency cesarean, but I think that's beautiful reframing. I love that as well.
My friend had a really nice perspective that I was happy to hear, and I'd love to hear what you think, but she said, you know, yeah, like birth was painful and hard, but she has never felt more like more of a team with her husband. Like, and you know, obviously not everyone has a partner all the time when they're going through this, but hopefully we do, or we have someone close to us that can be there. And I was like, she was like, I have never felt more close to my husband when, you know, I was going through that birthing process. And just this like idea that it brings, like it is a family affair, like it brings the family together, so to speak. And I like that too. That kind of gave me a little bit like, okay, maybe it's a good kind of pain, a pain that can bring people together, something that is necessary, like you're saying, to have these beautiful things like children and family. So you're muted, Melissa.
When did I do that? Okay. I don't, anyway, thank you for letting me know. Yeah, I think that's a really fabulous point, and something that I think that it's really important to bring up is that this is something that allows you to bond in this really amazing way with your partner, who, whether it be your spouse or, just some other support who's there for you, someone who's there for you, which, hopefully everyone has someone who can be there for you during your birth. But also it's this amazing time for you to bond with your baby. And this is something that I recently, actually at the last class that I taught, I always have like themes and I do little readings and stuff like that. This last week I was talking about partnership with your baby. You're not going into this alone, even if you are alone, right? Even if you don't really have a great support system, you have your baby. And so going into anything that we go into in life where we feel isolated and alone, it's just not going to go as well for us. Knowing that you have a partner in crime, a tiny baby, even though they're a tiny baby, right? Knowing that you're working together. They want to get out too. Actually, I shouldn't say that because I would love to stay in for the first 3 months. And that's the 4th trimester. And I'll let my friend Carla tell you more about that time frame. But I'll share a personal story that's very special to me, is that when I was birthing Lenny, my second daughter, when I was crowning, when her head was descending through the birth canal and she was coming out, I felt a kick up into me, like up into my abdomen. And I was like, oh, is everything okay? And my midwives were like, oh, what happened? I was like, she just kicked. And they're like, oh, she's trying to get out. She's helping you. Like she kicked back up into me to push herself down to get out. And I was like, oh my God, like it was very special. And I felt like she's helping me. And I didn't know she was a she at the time. I was like, oh my God, this baby is helping me. Like we're working together. And to come to birth with that mindset of like, hey, me and my partner are going into this, like my spouse or my partner, whoever is here for me, my midwives, my doctors, all these people are a great support system, but me and my baby are doing this, and we have to trust ourselves to work together to get this thing done. And I think that that's a really important point, is that coming into it and finding a bonding experience, not only with your significant other or some sort of support system, but also with your baby.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that that's a really good, usually at the end we ask like, what's one important thing that that a woman should do as she is planning her pregnancy, if she is pregnant, if they're, in the planning stages. And you've given us a lot of good tips, but I don't know, is there one that kind of stands out that would be important?
I would add, I would say birth is not an emergency. This is something that we've come to believe in our culture, is that because all the movies are like, oh my God, my water broke, I'm going to have the baby in 10 minutes. And it's like, no, it's, birthing is a very long process. And the more that you can kind of do labor at home, in a space that you're comfortable, your body will open up because you feel more comfortable. Give your dog a hug, right? Be with your partner, have a last slow dance, make out with your partner, do things that make you feel really comfortable, because that will allow you to dilate. If, going straight to a hospital can actually slow things down. And oftentimes doctors will push you away anyway and say, you're just not ready. So laboring at home, I'd say, is a really important thing, because birth is really not an emergency. Baby's not just going to pop out. There's a lot of time that is necessary. And if it's your second or third pregnancy, and in my yoga classes, we talk about, okay, for second and third pregnancy, birth typically goes a lot quicker. So here are poses that you can do to slow it down if you're still at home and you're half an hour away from the hospital, right? But it's really not an emergency. I just want to stress that it's something that you can actually take part in, have fun with. You can go do stuff in early labor, and just taking your mind off it can be really helpful in terms of dilation. And the other really important thing that I forgot to mention when we were talking about actually getting to the hospital and talking to doctors about what they will allow is making a birth plan. I always recommend making a birth plan, because then you've written down what you want to do. And there's great templates online. I could share some with you guys if you want to, templates where you can just fill in the blank. Oh, this is what I want. This is in terms of cord clamping. This is what I want in terms of my labor and delivery. This is who I want to be there. These are the drugs that I want administered or not. This is the type of birth that I want. All that kind of good stuff. Because writing it all down, sharing it with your doctor so they're not, so they completely realize what you want. And then they can, you can talk to your doctor about what works, what they feel comfortable with, what you feel comfortable with, what your support feels comfortable with. So having a birth plan, I think, is really important too. And getting out and moving, just moving in any way that you can is going to be really great as you prepare as a pregnant woman and also as you birth. So.
I love that. A pregnancy plan is so cool because, I'm sure in the moment it's written down and it's there. And I know at least, Clara, you're a planner, so you're probably on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I will definitely have a guide and some clear choices, but I've heard also that because I can get really attached to the plan.
That's the other thing is practicing non-attachment.
Yeah.
Is really important too. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, cool. This was awesome. So much. I didn't know anything about this stuff. So I'm wheels turning and so useful.
I feel like I talked way too much.
It was good. We could definitely keep going. I mean, there was things we didn't even get to. So maybe another time. But I think you should start a podcast actually, Melissa.
Oh, I thought about it. Let's see.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. It was so much fun to have you. You're so knowledgeable. I can tell you're a professor. It's very, very fun to listen to you.
You guys are the cutest.
That's probably why I talk so much. I'm so used to getting lectured.
Well, thank you, Mel.
Can I share ways to contact me or?
Yes. What would you like to share?
So you can find me on Instagram. Rio Prenatal Yoga is on Instagram now. We also have a Facebook page. You can also find our website, which just got up, and it's really exciting. And I'm excited to see where that goes. So that's just at rioprenatalyyoga.com. So
awesome, and we will link all of those up in the show notes.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you. Bye, ladies.
Bye.
Bye.